Yes, hello everyone. Just to say it again, my name is Anne Klontz and I'm the curator for the theme exhibition this year. And I have the pleasure of being in conversation today with two artists working with textile. And I'd like to welcome and introduce Kviltu Lidal. She's a textile artist who is participating in the theme exhibition, The Hands That Unravel the Sweater. And then I'd also like to introduce Ragnhild Lie. She is participating in the member exhibition titled In the Aftermath. And both of you are members of the Norwegian Association of Arts and Crafts. And Karen, you're based in Oslo. And Ragnhild, you're from the Lofoten area of Stamsund. Great. And okay, yes, thank you for the clarification. Yeah, but we have this opportunity now to really go in depth around the material of textile. And I thought I could begin the conversation today with a close-up of a work that is by Hanne Ryggen from 1937. And this piece is titled Unwed Mother. And I think it's really wonderful because we have this mother who is working, like many of us, and also trying to raise a family at the same time. But in relation to this image here, I would like to have Karen and Ragnhild tell us a little bit about their experiences with textile growing up. So, who would like to begin?
Yeah, this image brings a memory to mind because my mother was a weaver. She was trained at Husflidsskolen, where she's still a weaver. And I used to make a house in her loom. I'm sure others have that same experience. Yeah, but with textiles, I had this little collection of rectangular textiles. Old bed sheets, like smaller ones for kids, from my doll, baby coverlets, and stuff like that. And this little collection I used to take with me and lay them out on the floor to make a house. So one was the bed and one was the kitchen, and yeah. And then I would wrap them up and bring them with me to another place and lay them out there. So that was a game that I used, that was a way to play house kind of, or use textile to make architecture. Yeah, so that was, that's the strongest relationship I would say that I had to textiles when I was a kid. But also learning to knit early. I think everyone learned that in school, like in 1st or 2nd grade. And weaving in kindergarten, so yeah.
Yes, I also learned to knit very early. I think that was common for my generation. My mother taught me. And I had a grandmother, she was doing knotted rugs, a bit like this. And we had all these rugs, all sorts of places, because she made a lot. And me and my brother, he was 2 years younger than me, we used to make these rugs like boats on the floor in the living room. Very slippery wooden floor, and we would slide them, and they would like hell all around. So like very dangerous sea or something. We have to jump from one carpet to the other. But all the time these rugs were the safe place. My grandmother, she gave me money and also to join a course and also to buy the weaving frame to start tapestry weaving in secondary school. So I think that's actually the beginning of my career in a way. Yeah, as a textile artist.
Okay, great. And for the next question, I'd really like to talk about textile traditions, weaving, and as it relates to Norway. And this is because, Karen, we have talked a lot before about your interest in Norwegian textile traditions such as the okle. And Ragnhild, I've talked also with you, and you work a lot from an economic level, and you dye a lot of your wools. So I'd like to know also more about why is it important to you in your practices to be continuing these traditions and working with these techniques?
Actually, I found this question very hard when you gave it to me because it's so obvious. Thinking, well, how can I explain it? It is important because it's fun and it makes me kind of drop out of everything else when I work with it. Like we talked about yesterday, this process of doing is really very, very nurturing in a way. But it is of course very important to keep on doing what the people before us has been doing, to take care of tradition and our culture. But I think also now, and it becomes perhaps even more clear, that we need to know it to perhaps survive. Never know. I might need to make your clothes one day, you know. So I'm trained as a weaver, and I am very proud of knowing a little bit about weaving. I can say that because I've been doing it in many years, and I know now all the things I don't know, because weaving is a huge, huge area. And about the dyeing, I think it's also it's witchcraft in a way. It's super nice to be seeing the colors coming through, and yeah, with the indigo, you know, it's all yellow in the beginning, and then put it up in the air, and it turns blue. I'm very fascinated by it still. So it's lovely, very meaningful.
I'm looking forward to learning about that at some time. I haven't gotten so far yet in my practice. But you were asking about okler. I've been weaving for a few years now for a project for an exhibition at Kunstnerforbundet, which opens August 11th. Hope you can be there, some of you. And I've been looking into okler, which is an old Norwegian tradition, and you can find them in many houses, inherited from grandmothers, and yeah. But the okler really interests me because it's a kind of textile that was used. It has a connection both to the body and to the architecture that I'm interested in. They had them on the bed as a cover. You could sew sheepskin under them to make them warmer, but you can also hang them on the wall as decoration and as insulation, of course. So it has both of these kinds of uses. So I'm interested in it, not so much like the techniques of it, and yeah, I'm a nerd in many ways, but I'm not like a technique nerd. I'm more interested in the archaeology, I guess, and the anthropology. How was the textiles used, and what meaning did it have for people? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think one thing that has been really interesting to me and has made a strong impression on me is how much these Norwegian textile traditions are carried through generations. And Ragnhild, is like you say, it's this really wonderful knowledge. And it is super important, especially as we become more and more globalized and more dependent on like capitalists and like fast fashion, for example, you know, that it really is like a really unique language that is important to keep alive today. So this was one of the reasons and why I wanted to ask you is like, why are you working with it and developing it, and what are your interests? But now let's see if I can get this to work. Okay. So what I'd like to talk about now are the works that you have in the exhibitions. And on the far left, we have a new work by Karen. It's titled Femme Maison. And then on the right side, this is just one image from Ragnhild's series of flags. And it is, the work is titled False Flags with a Knee Pad. So just for the sake of the PowerPoint, I've selected one flag and the knee pad. Is it really? Thank you for clarifying. Yes. Okay. But the reason why I wanted to meet with both of you was because I think that there's this interesting thread that is between your works and your practices. And it relates to the fact that you both work conceptually. And Ragnhild, we talked about how you work with issues related to the economy and the environment. And Karen, you work a lot around gender and hierarchies. So I thought maybe we could talk a little bit about these ideas in relation to the works that you have presented in the exhibitions.
Yeah, I am very interested in female sides of culture and issues that have been under-communicated and undervalued. Textile handicraft is such an issue. Textile handicraft has been really important for women as a creative outlet. I think, of course, often starting with necessities like, okay, my kids needs new clothes, or you had to sew, you had to make something, new mittens for your husband who's going to sea, maybe up here. But I also think it's just such an important creative outlet. And it's a way to construct, a way to express yourself, a way to meditate, to think about the big things going on in the world and in your community, and a way to share knowledge with other women, other generations, and a way to think. So yeah.
Actually, I forgot what to say. What's your question?
Yeah, no, I want to know. You work quite conceptually with your practice in the works, and you also have a lot to say around like working with the economy and the environment in your practice. So can you talk a little bit about that in relation to how you're working and in connection to false flags?
Yes, I could start with working with wool. Wool is very environmental friendly. In a way, it's not really that. It is, for me, environment. You can compost wool without any problems. It's not a threat to the environment at all. And the wool that I'm using is local, so it hasn't traveled far. It isn't full of all sorts of chemicals. And I have been taking part in choosing the wool myself, so I know the wool, and some of the wool is also from my own sheep, so I know the wool really well. Yeah. Actually, it's the same kind of wool as she has been using in her material, so and it's spun on the same spinning mill, but it's not from the same animals.
I was actually asking Ragnhild yesterday if maybe it could be her wool that I was using, because she's been sending it to Hillesvåg where I bought it, but you always get your wool back from them when they've spun it. Yeah.
It's as close as it gets, yes. So I love working with wool because it's very physical, it's very organic. You could You could dye it, you could press it, you could shape it in many, many ways. You could use heat, you could use soap, you can make it shrink. And yeah, it's lovely to work with the wool, and it makes very much sense to use a local raw material. Yeah. Why is there a knee pad there, kneeling pad?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I shouldn't talk too much about how you experience my work, but I think we need to be humble to kneel down. Perhaps we even need to pray for the future. So perhaps my next work should be a lot of praying pads or kneeling pads, so you could actually kneel down and stay there for a while.
Well,
Yes.
maybe like, you know, what you're talking about praying and kneeling down, maybe that leads us into my next question specifically for you. In doing research about your works, you have incorporated quite a lot of works with banners and expressions on them, and then also now with this series of flags. Yeah, maybe you can go into a little bit more about why have you incorporated this sort of why have you incorporated banners and flags as a symbol?
Yes, I was very glad about what you said earlier now, Lisa, about the work that was done in the 70s, which was very political. And by the time I entered art college in Bergen in the 90s, the political art was completely off. Nobody talked about that. We didn't really talk that much about what it was about. We talked about materials, if it was stiff or soft or, you know, red or blue, and we kind of really worshipped textile as expressions, which is of course wonderful, but for me it was never enough. I want to say something more, and that's why it's really great to have banners, because this is what I mean. And of course, you don't need to do it verbally directly. You could use a textile language and a lot of references to different things still. Banners, of course, it speaks for itself. It is, of course, to make a message very clear. But flags are more symbols, could also be meant to be a very clear message. I have been sailing, we have been talking about sailing, we are sailors, most of us. And if you are at sea, especially abroad, you really need to follow the rules, how to use flags. Earlier, if you had a strong disease entering on board and entered New Harbor, you must have a yellow flag on the starboard side saying, we have disease, we might need a doctor, or you might need to stay away. We are in quarantine. It's like the yellow flag means the letter Q. And you have to have guest flags. The Norwegian flag in the back, and the country you're visiting is like a little flag also on the starboard side. So we talked about the sailing, and I said that I was once on a very long sailing trip earlier, and then when we came to a new country, we needed to make this flag. So we actually made it by all the textile we had on board. Oh yeah, this t-shirt is the right kind of blue. Can I take a piece of your t-shirt to hand sew these flags? So I do have some personal experiences with flags myself.
Yeah, so they're important forms of, you know, not only communication, but oftentimes, yeah, protest and making a statement.
Yeah.
Thank you. And Karen, also a question to you about your work Femme Maison. And oftentimes throughout your practice, you're working with ideas around architecture and feminism. And from this process, you have developed this really wonderful vocabulary that you call female architecture. And it would be really wonderful if you could share with the audience more about this and maybe, if you want, in relation to this work.
Yeah, for some years I've been looking into architects who have used the male Western average man's body as kind of the standard for good design and architecture. And I've been making my own kind of female anti-examples, I guess. But this term female architecture I started using in text after researching quilts, actually, because I was looking at this great quilting tradition in America from Gee's Bend, really beautiful quilts, and a lot of them have names related to architecture, like log cabin is the most common one, and courthouse steps and rooftop, and they have these architectural terms or names for the different patterns. And one of the Gee's Bend women were interviewed, and she said making a quilt is like building a house. So that was when I first thought of that textile handicraft can really be a kind of female architecture, because when the men had the possibility to actually build the log cabins and actually build even the courthouse steps to be outside in public space and use their bodies and their minds to create the world and express themselves, the women did the same, but inside, in interior, in their house, in their homes. So the textile was really a way for them to do that, I think. So it's a really rich basis of, it's a rich knowledge in the textile handicrafts that I'm thinking about when I say female architecture.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you both.